Whose corner are you in, Don Cherry or Ron MacLean? Today on Hub Hits, we're going to dig into the big story that's rocking the hockey world and affecting how we think about popular culture here in Canada. To help unpack it all, I'm joined by Speer, co-founder and editor-at-large at the Hub. Hey, Sean.
Hey, great to connect with you, Rudyard, as always.
You're our resident hockey expert, and some people might be saying, well, why is the Hub talking about Ron MacLean and Don Cherry? We think this is an interesting kind of cultural moment. Something's happened over the weekend, another kind of chapter in the bust-up of this big cultural duo in Canada. Why don't you bring our listeners and viewers up to speed first on kind of what happened over the last 72 hours or so and your thoughts on why it matters.
Yeah, the Beatles had Paul and John. Canada has Ron and Don. As listeners and viewers no doubt know, they represented two parts of Hockey Night in Canada for a long time. You turn in on Saturday night to catch the two of them talking about hockey, but also talking about the country and our culture and our society more broadly. Don Cherry, of course, left the broadcast a few years ago as a result of some comments he made in and around Remembrance Day, but he's remained a pretty significant cultural figure nonetheless, including hosting a popular podcast, similarly at the intersection between hockey and culture. In recent weeks, there's been some speculation, Rudyard, that he's stepping down from that podcast because of health reasons. He's now 91, and his local newspaper was doing a long-form essay, a long-form reporting about Cherry's imprint on the Canadian culture and hockey and all the rest. And over the weekend, we learned that as part of that reporting, his longtime broadcast mate, Ron MacLean, made some comments to the journalists involved about Cherry's health information that had previously been private, but perhaps more importantly, some comments about Cherry's departure from Hockey Night in Canada in a way that, as we've discussed offline, sort of captured some broader political fault lines in our country. And for that reason, it's generating a lot of buzz, and we thought it was something worth talking about.
Yeah, it's kind of... it reminds me a little bit of like Hillary Clinton's, or was it Barack Obama's moment where they, talked about what were they called, Sean? The incorrigibles, the despicables. I forget the exact nomenclature.
Clinton famously talked about the deplorables in the 2016 campaign. But you may recall previously Barack Obama talked about a certain group of people who clung to their religion and guns, and there is something like that in MacLean's comments to this journalist. He talks, for instance, about how Cherry's, both his patriotism and some of the comments he made about new Canadians and their propensity to champion or recognize Canadian history was something that sounded good in quote-unquote his world, which implied that they almost occupied different parts of Canadian society. One in which adherence to the progressive worldview made one righteous and moral, and Cherry's, which personified, as you say, a kind of deplorable aspect of our culture. And of course, MacLean's comments have generated a huge buzz. We've had columns, including incidentally today in the Toronto Star, kind of calling him out for letting down his friend. Over the weekend, Toronto Sun reporter Joe Warmington interviewed Cherry, who's disappointed that at the end of his career, MacLean took this opportunity not to pay a tribute to Cherry and his contribution to Canadian culture, but almost to display his own progressive bona fides.
Yeah. And again, I think what's interesting about these two guys is they kind of both like symbolically represent like two really divergent strands in the kind of public personalities and I don't know, ways of like thinking about the country. Cherry, the scrapper, controversial. At times, let's face it, his comments that got him kicked off CBC, saying that immigrants should go buy a poppy because they need to show some respect for Canada, was like not called for, was outside the bounds of the type of opinion that people should be saying publicly on a national broadcaster. So I think he got what he deserved there. But what's interesting, Sean, is that Ron MacLean is in some ways just as interesting a kind of avatar for identity. Like, the attention obviously is on Cherry. Those loud suits and ties certainly help. But Ron MacLean is this kind of company man. This kind of look, it was his role. He was the straight man. He was Ed McMahon to Don Cherry's Carson. But he's something more than that. Somebody who kind of painted the world in shades of gray, who always said the expected thing, the conventional thing, behaved within these very narrow and confined parameters of his on-air identity and his off-air identity. He was, in a sense, intimately acceptable to the kind of corporatized product that is national sports now in our country, owned by big Canadian incumbent companies. And as that company man, you got to admit, Sean, he's come out on top in the Canadian system. He's the one with the multi-million-dollar TV contract. He's still on air. He's still doing what he's doing. And you have to wonder if this isn't kind of an interesting cultural moment, a moment where we kind of acknowledge what Canada has become, that we're maybe, some would say for the better, we are not a country of Don Cherries anymore. We do not allow brash and controversial opinions to flourish on our airwaves. We self-select for the Ron MacLeans of this world, for the gray on gray, for the predictable, for the conventional. And that's part of, this kind of corporatized media that dominates this country. It is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting insight, and I think there is something to it, that in today's culture, in which there is a instinct to try not to provoke or to offend, we've in a way, Rudyard, we've moved to a kind of median point of view that basically could be written by ChatGPT at this point. It's highly predictable. It's as you say, kind of highly self-centered. It highly conventional, and in that sense, MacLean personifies that instinct. I will say this though, that ratings have fallen considerably in the years in which Cherry left. And in a way, to stick with your analogy or your metaphor, is that a sign that, notwithstanding the efforts on the part of the establishment or the elites to try to constrain different points of view or to limit or exclude different perspectives, that there is, I'm not prepared to call it a silent majority, but a significant share of the population who reject that kind of corporatized thought and corporatized speech and are searching for the equivalent of a Don Cherry. I think that has been reflected in our politics at various points over the past several years, including most significantly, of course, the trucker convoy in the context of the pandemic. But in some ways, people are voting with their eyeballs, Rudyard, and they're rejecting MacLean's type of constrained thought and speech, and they're being drawn to other places where they can hear people be more authentic and more interesting, even if that, of course, comes with the risk of being offended.
Yeah, and again, the comment section, no doubt, on the YouTube channel will explode when I say the following. But Don Cherry, if you want to think of this as like political tribes, is kind of in the Pierre Poilievre camp, right? Here was somebody who was willing to be edgy, who was kind of saying unconventional and sometimes, things that really, frankly, in some instances, offended people, outraged people. We can think of Pierre Poilievre's comments previously, less so in recent history, but previously about the World Economic Forum and, all that kind of woo-woo. And then you have Ron MacLean, who's kind of like let's face it, he even maybe looks a little bit like Mark Carney. It's this kind of modulated package of capable, competent blandness. And I think there's, as you say, there's another huge part of the country that really likes that really says that is Canada. We are that we are a one company town. It was the Hudson's Bay Company once. Maybe it's Rogers. Do they own most of hockey now in Canada? Maybe that's our one company town these days. I don't know, but I don't know, Sean. Let's wrap up by having you talk a little bit. I mean, you're a Thunder Bay native. You come, and I think that's why we appreciate your contributions at the Hub. Is you come maybe from a culture that's closer to the world of the Don Cherries and the Pierre Poilievres than the Ron MacLeans and the Mark Carneys. What do you think people in Thunder Bay, are feeling about this? Forget the media elites in Toronto, where I'm broadcasting from.
It's a great question. I think they go to something even more base, and that is the subject of loyalty. Behind all of these efforts on our part to try to pull this up into a broader cultural or political commentary, for a lot of people, Rudyard, this is a relationship between two men, a relationship that we saw play out on our television screens every Saturday night. There was a sense that back when Sherry left, that Ron MacLean looked out for his own interests and didn't stand up for his friend. One can agree or disagree with that. But just as I think that instinct was starting to dissipate, and in fact, there's been some reports that the two of them had reconciled in recent years, at this moment, it is just so bizarre and frankly kind of narcissistic for MacLean to demonstrate this kind of disloyalty to his friend, to take an interview that should have been as I called it earlier, tribute to his cultural and sports significance to the country, and ultimately make it about himself. I think for a lot of people, Rudyard, that's the way they're thinking and talking about this, and I think it will do harm to Ron MacLean's reputation with a large share of the country who's come to follow him and trust him for so long.
Yeah. Well, let's put Sean's great article up on the screen, and you can catch it in the Hub today. Sean Speer, maybe Ron MacLean is the one that needs to go. Read that right now at the Hub, www.thehub.ca. If you're watching on our podcast or you're watching on our YouTube channel, please subscribe, click on that little notification bell to get all of our videos sent to you the moment they're published. And if you are listening online, thank you so much for being a podcast viewer. We really appreciate your time and attention. Write us a review. Let us know what you thought of this or all of our episodes on the Hub's podcast channel. Thanks again for watching and listening. I'm Rudyard Griffiths. Until next time, bye-bye.